Welcome back to Reimagine. Here we are, this time of the year, it's kind of a crazy market we're running through. Since Reimagine has started, I think the market has been, we've been running into this bull market, seen all the hype, seen all the growth. But for better or worse, there seems to be a twist happening right now. Whether we talk about the rising of Dogecoin, whether we talk about, the huge surge in meme stocks and in cross finance and in so many elements of the market right now, things seem to be taking a twist. Whether that ultimately leads to great surges or whether that's the rise before an inevitable fall. I think our next guest is going to have a lot to say on this matter, plus so much more as someone who really understands the space and who has been an innovator and a grower in the space. So I'd like to welcome, without further ado, Shawn Owen, the CEO of Equa. Shawn, firstly, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, Ash, great to be with you. Very excited about the conversation.
Okay, Shawn, so let's dig straight into things. Before, we sort of get into some of your personal views and ideas on certain things, I want to get a little bit of your personal history. I want the audience to understand who you are, why you're significant, why we're talking to you, and some of the key highlights, perhaps, of your career in the crypto space and beyond. Let's not limit ourselves.
Sounds good. Yeah, so the fast version of my origin story is 2008, recognized a change in the world that made me want to dig into money at a great deal, out of a great deal of fear. That led into looking at gold and other types of assets without looking at simply what I'd been doing before, which was real estate, stocks, and bonds. That led to getting lucky and hearing about digital gold in the form of Bitcoin around 2010. Got obsessed. Many people with the same type of story where you just fall down the rabbit hole and get totally obsessed. There wasn't much going on back there. It was hard to find real people to talk to and whatnot, but continued with the evolution of learning about mining, learning about everything you could about the industry before there was an industry, and it just evolved. And as it kind of evolved, I got focused on how to host meetups and how to meet people in the space when people started to show up and not to just be synonymous or anonymous. So they would show the real face, and that was great. I met a lot of great people there. Looked at a couple different startups in the space that really were too early or wouldn't have worked, related to payments and related to rivaling with credit cards, looking at how to solve cash problems for certain types of businesses, such as the marijuana industry. And all of those kind of led up to, as precursors, the founding of a company with my co-founders called SALT Lending, or it stood for Secured Automated Lending Technology, which was really getting excited about the second layer of Bitcoin at the time, of being able to put non-fungible items and smart contracts on Bitcoin. That, of course, ended up on Ethereum. So we were very focused on how to build smart contracting with lending and different types of financial transactions with smart contracts. Everybody kind of knows what happened between 2017, 2018, the best of times, the worst of times. It's very exciting. And throughout all that process, really started to realize there was this trend. People were talking about securitized tokens, the tokenization. We'd all seen there was some missing elements to what seemed to be so exciting about what ICOs could do. That really was related to governance, in my opinion, and just needing to go much deeper on smart contracting. We've seen that kind of turn into what we call DeFi now, and I've really seen a lot of it come to life. And that in the process founded the company Equa, which is hyper focused on how to improve how humans agree with each other in this type of contracting layer, and what it looks like to do legally compliant or diverse organizational structures that would be tokenized. And here we are today. So it's been quite the exciting year. We're blasting away on both those companies, are still full cycle. So happy to talk about anything under the sun.
Yeah, it certainly is a hell of a story, and well summarized, I must say. You've got that timeline down to a fine art, and I respect that. But I want to touch on a point you said just there before we get too much into the sort of the details of various companies and what they're doing. Something you said just there about falling down the rabbit hole, way back in 2010. It's something that so many in this space talk about. Seeing the light, falling down the rabbit hole. Any number of sort of allegories, analogies, whatever euphemistic terms that people want to throw out and use. Why do you think it is that when it comes to crypto, particularly early crypto, it's such a almost religious fervor that seems to grip people? Firstly, do you think that's a fair statement? And if so, why do you think it is that it's got that sort of grip on people?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair statement, and I look at it like that very much. I think it's because it's truly revolutionary. I think of it as evolutionary more so, but it really does change the paradigm and it changes everything when you think about something as fundamental as value. And the first time for anybody when you really get it and you go, what? Wait, this solves counterfeit. This solves borders. This solves a fraud. This solves, like, there's so many problems that were solved with the creation and the invention of Bitcoin that it really kind of blows your mind in a way where you almost don't, it seems surreal, I think, in a way. And then when you recognize all the potential, it's really exciting. I think it's extremely exciting. And I've I'm still excited, and it's been 10 years solid of this, and I feel more excited now than I even did then. So I feel like that ability to see potential, especially for people who are entrepreneurial minded, but I think for everybody, there's just this exuberance and excitement and optimism that comes naturally from that energy that captivates, and you see it over and over with everybody. And I think that is why there's so much loyalty to it, right? Like, it's not something that you get excited about and then it's a fad and it goes away. You stay excited. You know, it's great. If anybody watched the recent debate between Saylor and the other guy about gold versus Bitcoin, and the fundamental difference between something that is rooted in hedging your bet and very fearful versus something where, yeah, it can do that, but it's also way more about fundamentally changing everything, and this ability for us to do new things that are better for society, that I think generates a lot of that.
Do you think there's any sort of risk in the fact that something, you know, in investment, you know, and you're coming from a mindset that, you know, you've worked in this space on the investment side, on the business side, on the enterprise side, at a space where people build these sort of loyalties. And I'm thinking as well at the moment of things like, you know, Tesla has that same sort of or a similar fervor around a Tesla stock, or GameStop at the moment. You know, people sort of have this sort of fervor about, you know, I'm going to hold no matter what, and you have all the sort of the memes and the ideas associated with that. Now, Bitcoin obviously goes back a long way before that, you know, in terms of the length of its community. But I don't know, I sort of wonder, does it not risk people getting really badly hurt down the line to have that sort of emotional attached to something that's an investment, or is that its real strength?
I think that's its real strength. I understand why there's so much concern about the risk, right? Because a lot of times when you see something with people that excited, it turns out to be a Ponzi scheme or an MLM bullshit business, right? And so I think we're all naturally skeptical as humans when somebody's promoting something so heavily. You're like, okay, yeah, right. That's not really how the world works. So what's in it for you? And why are you doing this? Where's the scam? What's the catch? But truly, that is the beauty of it also, is that you're looking at not just a hypothetical blue sky and somebody promoting something that's vaporware. It's really changing the game. There's actually really exciting things happening, and it's awesome and inspiring to be a part of it.
Awesome and inspiring, absolutely, no doubt, and I'll agree with you there. I'm sick of playing devil's advocate. I'm always trying to do that, but you know what? You're absolutely right. It is awesome. It is inspiring, and I think we can fairly say that. All right, so let's get down into brass tacks a little bit. So, Salt. Now, you started this back in an era when the idea of collateralizing on your crypto assets kind of seemed ludicrous. Talk us a little bit about that mindset, what led you to do it, and what led you to be such an innovator in a space that at that point didn't really exist.
Yeah, so it wasn't ludicrous for anybody who had been holding Bitcoin or interacting with Bitcoin for probably a couple of years, right? Like, once you understood this is something of value, it's my preferred method of saving or storing, or being excited about the potential of it in the future, whatever the case of why, if you had something that is property and you can't do anything besides sell it, effectively, as soon as the IRS came out that said that when spending it would be selling it, then it really became abundantly clear that if you could hold it as collateral and continue to hold it as property, it would be very valuable. You know, it's a little bit of research looking into it to see that every other type of asset has a credit market around it of some sort. You know, you'll find a lender that will lend you money on just about anything of value. and that this was emerging, that it would have to have some kind of credit model. The interesting part was I vastly underestimated how hard it would be to convince people who are just hearing of Bitcoin for maybe the first time of this proposition. So, the timeline was funny because we could say, okay, let's go talk to these local banks. They'll totally get this. We could build the technology for them. We could do our first pilot case and just totally build it all out for this ability for banks to see where they're going. And, finally, I think one guy was really good about it, but he said, look, I'm just going to be honest with you. Banks don't innovate. They don't have an R&D department. All the shiny glass and the retrofit of their new office, that's just to make it look like we're sticking with the times, but they're never going to understand this. You should probably build it first some other way. And so it became, okay, so we got to back down the chain a bit and go to family offices and local investors and people that would understand this. And even that was very difficult to explain to anybody who wasn't on the Bitcoin side, because we inevitably always ended up with this, spending all of our time talking about, well, what if Bitcoin goes to zero? And it was like, hit your head in every single time, painful, because you were just repeating, well, what is mining? How does mining? And we'd say, no, that's not important, right? Like, everybody's got a bigger problem if it goes completely to zero, and then it doesn't exist. So let's look at it more like a car loan or something else. But it just was abundantly clear for anybody who saw that Bitcoin was real value, that it needed to be there.
It's interesting in the framework, I think, at the moment, people are revitalizing and revisiting to some degree the Bitcoin as, a digital gold versus what now many call the arcane idea that Bitcoin was ever going to be like a peer-to-peer transaction network. And I feel like something like, the ability to collateralize, crypto as an asset and utilize it for greater lending purposes obviously lends way more towards the digital gold side of things. And that seems to almost be, accepted, thought right now. But I don't know that the debate is fully settled. Do you have any views on that? I mean, is there any notion of utilizing, the true Bitcoin use as it was intended to be used, or, the sort of Roger Ver argument that we need faster transactions and that's the strength of the network? Or is this settled debate and it is digital gold and we all just need to accept it and move on?
I don't think it's settled. And to be very clear, my position getting in was, it should be cash. It should be digital cash, and that it would be way more valuable if people spent it. I was the first running the first brick and mortar business in Colorado that accepted Bitcoin as a currency, and we had tested it out, and it worked great back in the day before there were fees, and before the IRS said, hey, every one of those transactions, you're going to have to do a basis cost analysis with your tax professional. So I still believe that at a certain point in time, when it gets to a critical mass, that will happen. I actually do think that it's the long road to get there, but that Roger Ver is right in that way, in that manner. There's two different ways for something to become adopted, right? And this one is clear that it's being adopted as a store of value first. And so I wanted to spend it. We used to all spend it. Everybody I'd watch spend it would then immediately go back and buy more. So you could tell that we all wanted to hodl more than we wanted to spend, but we really want to do both. And if it were treated like a currency for tax purposes, people would do both right now. I think you'd see it. You'd probably see mass adoption immediately if the tax consequences were more like currency and you could go spend it anywhere. So the fundamentals of it going up in value at some point become, so when the denominator switches and people are measuring things in Bitcoin, it changes the paradigm. So I don't think it's settled. I do think right now it's digital, it's better than digital gold, but I do think in the future it will become a currency.
Wow, I'm surprised to hear you say that, but I guess it leads nicely into the next idea, which I want to bring up, which is that this sort of development of an ecosystem and this development of a maturing of a market. And feel free to use this as a chance to talk about Equa and the work that you guys are doing there. But I suppose I'll ask it as a general question, which is, you were there through the 2017 ICO boom. You saw the bubble, saw it pop, saw the scams, the sort of the foolishness, the Ponzi's, whatever, everything and sundry that came into the space at that point. And then, the crypto winter, things went quiet. And as we all saw, I think most would agree, that's when the real development occurred. Here we are now in 2021. As I said at the beginning of this, Doge is, the number, whatever it is at the time of this filming and whatever it will be at the time of this airing. But, in the top 10 currencies, cryptocurrencies in the world right now by market cap, a joke coin that had $45 billion of market value. It seems ludicrous to me. Is the market mature? What's the space for maturity? Does it matter? Is it just a growth at all costs? What are your thoughts?
This is good. Yeah, there's so many thoughts around that. So, Doge is a meme. It's going to be there forever. I honestly think a lot of these currencies that are out running are just going to keep running. As long as there's an incentive or something interesting about them, they'll keep running. And there's an interesting kind of beauty in Doge specifically because of its story of clearly being a meme and all the stuff around it that's happened that's been funny. But it has real value right now, and I think it's going to continue to have real value. And I'm not that worried about it. I think from a maturity standpoint, I almost just kind of put Doge in a different bucket and say the real thing we all have to understand is that nobody benefits if there is fraud. Nobody benefits if if people lose money. Nobody benefits if we have to go through another cycle of getting slapped around or going through a harsh winter. That's just not beneficial for any of us, in period. And so we need to avoid that at any cost possible. And it's a totally different world today than it was in 2018, and so much more has developed. I agree that what really happens in the bear winter cycles is that whoever's really dedicated just keeps going, and the progress continues to evolve, and it will continue. It's just that it doesn't have any hype around it. So it really takes a lot more commitment to stick through one of those. That can be painful. I think 2018 was the most painful out of all of them by far. And hopefully we never go through something like that again to the same degree. And I think we won't because of there's a lot of reasons why I think we won't. But as far as a maturity level, there's kind of I don't know if there is a finality to the word mature. It's probably a never ending evolution. I think it really has matured to the point, especially this year, where it feels like it's not going away. It feels much more real, and that people are finally getting it to a degree where it matters. And it feels great to see it really come full circle. So where are the concerns? I think, like I said before, anytime people are too excited, it's questionable why. It's clear that there's a whole bunch of pumping going on and pumponomics, where the coin pump is the only purpose of the topic, which is really kind of annoying. And probably not good in the long run. But there's also just this reality of everybody's got to learn this some way or another, right? It's kind of like you got to learn not to touch the stove when it's hot as a kid. No matter how many times people tell you that, the fastest way to learn is when you end up burning your hand for a minute. So there's probably some reality that just needs to play out here that is inevitable. And I don't think that should take away from all of the positives that are happening. But there is a point of clarity. Not everything is a shitcoin. I think that term is very dangerous. It'd be better if we just called it what it is. It's either a scam, or it's something that's attempting to compete with Ethereum, or it's something that's attempting to do something new. If we could get a little more specific and not so overly generalizing of those terms, we might all benefit. So many thoughts on that. Could go probably all day on that.
Yeah, look, it's a huge topic. I like to throw the big things at the wall and see what sticks. But I think you really hit on that point there. I liked what you said there. That maturity is not some end goal. It's an ongoing element in the space. It's an ongoing sort of developmental process. This idea that we will never stop maturing. We need to continue to move forward and try things. And I guess as you said with Doge, people at least are being honest about this. People aren't pretending this is the next great thing. Everyone knows
it's not going to replace Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone knows there's no development on it. Even the creators are coming out and just being like, guys, this is a joke. What are you doing? Yeah. But people want to invest even though they know that. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's a touch in the stove sort of situation. But let's get beyond speculation. Let's get beyond just market caps and the front headline numbers that people get super excited about, obvious reasons. $1 trillion's a nice big old number. Everyone gets really nice and excited about it. But let's talk about some of the work that you guys are doing over at Equa, because that to me is some core blockchain developmental work that's going on that maybe doesn't see the light that as often, doesn't get sort of spoken about in the public as much. Take us a little bit through the SparkNotes version of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we didn't even mention the word blockchain. We founded in 2018, didn't even put the word blockchain or anything related until just in the last 6 months, really, because we didn't want to get just thrown into this lump of, oh, you're another token project, and people are going to jump to the potentially on the bandwagon of the terms we talked about, like shitcoins and stuff. We wanted to just build the real value proposition and use product, which is a lot of things, but at its core, it is how do we organize? How do we share information, and how do we agree with each other, and how can we improve that? And there's a fundamental part of property rights and ownership that I think crypto has improved dramatically and has so much more potential. And so early on, when I kind of caught myself telling people all the time, they'd say, what do you think the future looks like? And I'd say, well, I think eventually everything becomes tokenized, and the word token isn't really used as much, because ultimately what we're really talking about as an invention here is a better form of a ledger system and accounting, a better form for people to come to shared consensus. And that's amazing for something like digital gold, but imagine what it'll be like when we can do that for everything. And so the real parts of the market we're going after are, how do you apply smart contracts, and what does the term mean? Like, why did we call it a smart contract? I didn't come up with that name, of course. And I think it should be probably referred to as more like a smarter agreement or a smarter contract, or a self-executing whatever, but not going to change the market on names. We're just going to build on top of it. And so we're interacting with blockchain, we're interacting with NFTs, we're interacting with tokens in a specific way. But the real focus is, how do you come to governance, consensus, voting? How do we decide what we're doing together? And how do we have a permanent record that matters when it needs to matter, where it needs to matter? How do we create more of this feeling of a single source of truth, where you own your keys and you have third parties that are trusted to help you get done what you need to in the environment of an organization? So for example, if we start a company, everybody kind of knows what a company is. If you start a group or a society or a kind of friendship, you know what those are. If you get married, people know what that is. But how do we do that in a way, if we were to introduce blockchain technology to it and create real value? And so we're looking at, what is an organization? Why do people make LLC filings or corporation filings? What has been the technology used, and how can we improve that? That gets down into tokenization of ownership rights, permanent records distributed, decentralization and voting and signatures, and the creation of cap tables and records of ownership of any type of asset, specifically the beachheads of products that people use all the time that they know what they are cap table management, issuance, anytime a company needs to raise money. How do we solve what happened with ICOs? Well, so we had this amazing new technology, and it was almost like when you first get into Tesla and some of your friend hits the gas and it goes from 0 to 80 or whatever extremely fast, and it's kind of mind-blowing. ICOs was kind of like going from 0 to 1,000. It was just way too fast of a leap. And so it had all these unintended consequences. People jumped on, probably well-intended in some cases, or in other cases, clearly scams. But that doesn't mean that the technology or the idea that we could change how fundraising was bad. It simply means there were some missing pieces that needed to be evolved on. And we're focused on a lot of those pieces. How do you have a complete, full, encompassed picture of your company, your cap table, your organization, your DAO, whatever it might be, but still have all of the parts that we know need to be there? For example, if you're a corporation in Delaware, you're going to probably have to follow Delaware law, or it won't end well. And so you have to have the first rights of refusal worked out and all the different types of authorization documents needed. What does that look like, and can we improve upon that when it comes to using this technology, is really where we're focused. And so there's quite a bit to the product offering, and separate from the mission. We just believe that there can be a better world of how people agree with each other, more alignment, less disputes, less legal costs, more focused on building product if you build the foundation right.
Yeah, and it's a really important message you hit on there, and I want to touch on one of the points you said early in your answer there, which is the idea that as soon as you put the word blockchain into something, people go, oh, he's trying to push some token, this is just trying to pump some speculative thing. Oh, I don't want to get involved, and they miss so much of, I guess, those fundamental plumbing elements of blockchain that I think people often don't appreciate. That a blockchain sometimes gets mockingly called just a new type of like Excel spreadsheet or whatever, But you know what? People use that derisively. I actually think that's a great strength. I mean, can you imagine we don't have to imagine this sort of logistical capability being put in, and you see that, whether you're talking about IBM's TradeLens or, Microsoft Azure or Hyperledger or any of these sort of projects that aren't tied to some speculative coin, that people are trying to, use, and some for good, some for ill. I'm not here to judge coin creation, but that idea that we can actually reconstitute the fundamental plumbing and architecture of our world, whether it be financial, technical, logistics, or otherwise. I mean, that's a pretty powerful message, isn't it?
It's massive, and we're seeing it happen with DeFi. It is in fact happening. A lot of the stuff is innovative. And I think the point you touch on there that is really valuable for everybody to further or evolve is if we look at why does maximalism exist and what's the truth between on one far end of the spectrum, the reason for avoiding people getting scammed or buying stuff that's bull, and on the other side saying, yeah, but let's be realistic, there's a lot of value outside of just store of value that can be evolved with this technology. If you really look at it, I started off as a maximalist for Bitcoin hardcore, so much to the degree that I missed out on the entire Ethereum crowdfunding event when I hosted a party for it. And I still was just like, I've got 10 Bitcoin ready to send and I'm not going to do it because I just at the last minute care about my Bitcoin too much. But now I see that as like ridiculous because Ethereum has done so much good for evolving the conversation. Is it the end all be all? No, probably not. But I think it comes down to distinguishing between if something is attempting to call itself a better version of Bitcoin, that probably needs to be called out. That's probably a scam. But if it's saying, hey, we're not doing Bitcoin at all, we're doing computing, or we're doing whatever else, name the genre now, we're doing DEXs, or we're doing automated X, or we're doing Y, those probably have value to them. And people should not rush into that, confusing the other area of, you've got to distinguish between, am I doing this for an investment? That's where I think the thesis of just buy Bitcoin is probably good advice. Or am I doing this because I believe in innovation, or I want to take a flyer? And I don't have a problem with that. I think people should be able to do whatever they want personally with their money. It's not hurting anybody else. You just need to know what it is. You don't want to go hard into some project just because you think it's the next 1000x. And then, if it is, great, good for you. But don't confuse innovation with investment. Those are two totally different concepts.
And it is, I think it is a very important idea that people think that there's sort of like market value growth is equal in some way to a sense of innovation. And I guess those that survive a crypto winter, really see that isn't true. And I guess that's where you get that maturity in the space and that new wave that sort of gets brought in every time. Those that do stay on realize, oh yeah, market cap doesn't mean high quality, and we could move beyond that as such a poor headline metric.
Yes, exactly. That's when we know we're really maturing. To your point, is if we cannot do the huge up and the huge down crash, that's just not healthy, right? The sustained growth is much better. And save your money in Bitcoin would be my advice. Speculate on things that you're interested in. I like invest like you would with stocks or anything else if you're calling an investment, but remember the warning everybody always tells you, don't invest anything you're willing to lose. That's where I think the rationality comes in, where we can have the best of both worlds. If everybody just goes and dumps all their Bitcoin to run into the next 1000x, we're going to tank again. That's stupid. And if we don't empower innovation, if everybody was a maximalist, we would never evolve. We need everybody to be able to test these new DeFis out in a way where it's safe and can add value to society. You have to let it play out. You have to let people throw money around a little bit to see it work. But that's totally different than people expecting to have some giant return. You could lose your money if you go into the newest DeFi protocol, right? Take it easy and just be aware of what it is. And I think it'll all be fine.
So let's pivot then, I think, into a space which I think sort of mixes that world of the speculative and has been seen by many as a bubble, but also has some pretty fundamental architecture elements built into it. That of NFTs. I really see that as a nexus point between those two worlds. And I think there's so much potential there, but a lot of it is getting lost at the moment, I think, in a lot of hype, which I don't know, hype can be good. Obviously, it gets awareness. It gets people excited when, Beeple sells a $69 million piece of artwork. you know, people take notice, and, you know, everyone starts paying attention. So I guess that's good in the space in some ways, but also loses some of the undermines potentially some of the potential true tech and innovation there. Tell me a little bit about your views. I know you're involved in this a little bit, and yeah, give us your updates.
Yeah, so two topics there just to touch on. I think they're central to NFTs is a great topic. You know, first, hype I think is great when it's real, or, you know, allowing people to get excited. There's nothing wrong with that. When you get excited, when somebody gets excited because they were lied to or had false expectations, yeah, that's totally not good at all. But again, don't confuse what things are. Getting excited is good. You can't create a startup without imagining that the pitch deck is going to turn into something. You have to have a vision of the future that is better than today, and you have to get excited about it. Otherwise, nobody would ever do it because it's way too brutal. You know, so I have no issue. In fact, I think it's great that people are getting excited. It's interesting on the NFTs. I was super excited about NFTs when they first came out. And again, that term didn't exist. Somebody hadn't coined it. When, you know, originally it was Bitcoin layer one, and then look at this, we can do really interesting things with colored coins and other projects that we're going to build on layer two of Bitcoin that were like counterparty and colored coins. And I was so pumped about it. I'm like, this is amazing. Everything can be done. Baseball cards, you name it. And then of course it took however many more years later and it's now happening on different chains even beyond Ethereum, because it even can't handle the scale. But it's really fun and exciting to see some use cases come around where people are genuinely excited again. Sports, what's the purpose of going to a game? To get excited and see if your team wins, right? What's the purpose of going to a music concert? To get excited and have a good time. And what's the purpose of looking at art? That one's probably way more broad, but it's typically because there's some kind of some intangible value that comes out of it in the experience. So the ability to add this market dynamic in, I think it just makes everything so much better. Is it the perfect holy grail? No. Is all of it a scam? Definitely not, right? So it's more about people just being real about what things are and being excited enough to be real about that without feeling like you're selling snake oil or smoke and mirrors, right? And so I think the NFTs are great. We're dealing with them specifically for any unique asset. You could think about that for like a share certificate, a title registry, an identifier for yourself as a human, or for a certain document that's happened. Every one of those, I think anytime there's something that needs to be authentically proven true, right? Like we believe this is valuable enough that we're putting a whole bunch of stuff so it can't be counterfeit on your driver's license. That's an NFT potential. We believe this, there needs to be some certificate of authenticity for XYZ in the world. Probably a good use case if you can tie the two together. You know, it's extremely more simple to implement in the digital sphere, right? The metaverse and everywhere else. But that doesn't mean I don't think it can't be used for everything else. So companies are abstract by definition, and they're a form of technology. It's a way to describe how people organize with each other as a group. And we're looking at that from what's the common denominator here? And you and I have an idea today, and we decide it's a good idea, so we follow it through, we talk about it more, we share information, we decide to call it something. As we're calling it something, we decide we should register this as a company, it's got viability. All those steps of what I would call intellectual property or inception to a startup, and then all its life cycle, whether it gets sold or goes IPOs or disappears, all of those are these granular dynamic events that happen between people making decisions at certain points of time to ascribe value to things and then resell or package or put together an organization. And NFTs can play and will play, I think, a huge role in that. And again, I've never been a fan. I always end up calling out the names that get popular. Not that it's going to matter because everybody's going to call it an NFT. But what is an NFT is fundamental for people to understand, right? If you put it under the hood and it's not exciting anymore, it's still exciting to have a digital object represent something that can't be counterfeit, that can be programmed, that can collect royalties, that can be shared all around the world, that can live on forever. It's really amazing. So I'm curious where you want to go with it, but I'm fascinated and love the idea.
I think it's super interesting and super fascinating, but I want to really touch on a point that you made just there. And this is, excuse me if you allow me to indulge some of my speculative elements here. I love sort of speculating on where technology is going to head, but you said the idea of using NFTs as marking people,
Yep.
as a way of marking individuals and determining identity, and as a way of, following metrics for understanding, like who a person is and authentically crediting them through a world. That sounds like a technology and an element of it that is both awe-inspiring and terrifying in the same motion.
Totally.
I mean, can we delve down into that idea a little bit? Because like the potential, I mean, even think of the way countries like, let's say, China are choosing to use tracking and ranking star systems for their citizens, things like that. I mean, that's where my mind goes when I think of this, some sort of 1984-esque, horror machine. But can you delve a little bit into the potential of that idea?
This is where it gets really good for me, because I think fundamentally we do need principles around this, right? Like, we shouldn't be making rules around technicals. We should be making rules around principles so that it can be more flexible around what's the goal. And, with Equa, we made our mission to improve the human experience in a way so we would never fall off that track. And I think as a society, this is like new technology, just like it was when somebody first found out you could split the atom, right? Like, it can be used for amazing things or something terrifying. And technology, we've been living in a world where I think everybody kind of knows there's some serious things that have to be dealt with privacy and security and all these other elements, where we are in new water, right? Like, we're treading into unknown territories, and we do need to think about it. But to kind of elaborate on where I can see that going, I tweeted a couple of weeks ago, the human is the ultimate NFT, right? Which is you're the one thing that is for sure unique and non-fungible. But that can be taken down to quantified in a microcosm, or you can take it up a few degrees. And I'd say, just from the standpoint of like a person's identity online and what you own, we really do need to think about how this is going to be managed. I am personally a huge proponent of decentralization, because it is a way to stop power from consolidating in any one place. And I think when you really look at it for what it is, the reason why 1984 is so terrifying, and why we talk about China so much from our perspective of them being this regime that is top down, is because when that type of power consolidates, historically, bad things have always happened. Every history book is full of really bad things that happened. And in almost all of those circumstances, somebody had too much power, right? And so we need to figure out, how do we feel comfortable getting more into a world where we don't allow that kind of power to ever consolidate in the hands of, say, one person like Hitler. On the flip side, there's a huge exciting opportunity, because we really do have new tools that we didn't have before. These do fundamentally change the ability for how to think about how organizations work, what governments are, how people hold each other accountable, how do we deal with privacy, where are the zero proofs and all these technical terms really going to come in hand. And so I think it's exciting, and at the same time, we should really kind of have the conversation as a society sooner than later, that everybody's got a view about it, right? But our fears are typically, we can't have anarchy, but we can't have a dictator. So where is the middle? I think it's when we empower us, the people, the fringe, the end of the node, where everybody's a node, and we can cooperate in a way that's beneficial, then you kind of avoid both of those realities. And it's living in a consensual world where there's more freedom and more ability to interact and more ability to engage without any trade-offs. And there's always a trade-off, so we have to deal with it. But I definitely don't want to live in a world where everything is on a permanent blockchain and all of my information is accessible forever to somebody outside of me that is an authority. That sounds horrible, right? And so I don't know all the answers, but I do know that having the ability to manage your own keys, having your ability to manage your own information is definitely part of the fundamental. And distributing out the power and the decision-making seems to be a pretty good trend for getting something into the ecosystem that can't necessarily just be hijacked, corrupted, co-opted, shut down, right? So there's a lot of power to it, but I think we really just have to focus on building the right tools so that it turns into clean energy and not a nuclear bomb.
It's interesting the way you phrase that, and it reminds me of a conversation I was having with a friend of mine the other day who's very much not in the crypto space and not in the crypto world at all. And I was talking to him about the strength of the community and how so much development in this space is done by people who are working either on a voluntary or non-compensatory sort of basis, just, coding away and developing new ideas and building new architectures and technologies and sinking in millions of man hours of thinking up these new ideas and innovating. And even if they are getting paid, whatever, the people are putting so much into this because of passion. And he says to me, yeah, sounds great. Sounds like a good community. But on the other hand, aren't you guys just building all the keys to the kingdom that the powers that be will be able to come and pick up and say, thanks so much for developing this, and take off to use for their own purposes later down the line? I wonder your thoughts on something like that.
Yeah, so it's a great question, right? And I think about this question often. Is how do we make sure that at the end of the day, the principles and the consensus exist so that we get the foundation correct? Meaning, if you just say simply, okay, well, there's going to be a Bitcoin and a bank issued coin, and one is going to be totally open and censorship resistant, and the other is going to be completely permissioned, and you can only play if we say so. Which one of those do we want? We shouldn't just capitulate and say, oh, well, the banks are always going to win, or, oh, authority always has to be there, or, oh, we can never do that. I think we have to look at it for what it is and say, what is achieving the goal for humanity better, right? Which one of these is actually better, not which one are we more comfortable with or which one gives more power to certain individuals or groups, but how do we decide that this is important? Because I don't want to build tools that are just going to be handed over to some authoritarian regime, but I don't think that's what's happening. I think it's actually the opposite. The regimes like China, and I would say a lot of large governments could abuse this if done wrong, right? They're already doing that in a way, right? Like they're already building these systems of social tracking, and they've already been spying on everybody and eroding things for safety and security by taking away freedoms. That's not new. That's already how it is. So what is new is the ability to look at an alternative that is positive, that is not that, and not hand over just better keys of the kingdom. I think they already have the keys of the kingdom. It's more a matter of, is there a better alternative to that? Do we have to live in a world where there's a kingdom with somebody who's got the keys and nobody else does? No, I hope not. I think we need to look to how does this empower all of us, and so that we're building tools that hopefully don't have the ability to be hijacked.
Yeah, and I think that is the most powerful message out there. We can build the world that we want to create into the future, and if we build for it, then hopefully it will come. And if we can get that sort of collective, as you said, that each individual is a node, each striving towards the best goal, hopefully we can achieve that. And
yeah, we can, right? I mean, it starts with believing. If you think the world is a horrible place and will always be a horrible place, and people are always going to be horrible people, and we should always hedge our bets against everything because we all have to hide from each other, yeah, well, that's not a good future. I'm not really interested in that. I think that sounds like a horrible vision, so I'm not gonna subscribe to that. If you believe we can build a better world, and today is better than it was in the past, and that tomorrow will be better than today, and that we have the ability to achieve these things, even if it takes time, then it's much more optimistic. And I want to be a part of that. And I'm putting my personal money, time, and energy towards building a more exciting, better future, right? And I think that's what all the real entrepreneurs are. Why would somebody work for free? Why would somebody put their passion and their dedication into donating their time to build something better? Because they believe in a better future, right? You don't do that if you don't believe. So I fundamentally think we should stay excited. I like this space because I get up every day and feel like I can add real value, and that things are going to be better. And not only just from the standpoint of, yeah, if you acquire a certain amount of Bitcoin and it goes where most of us all think it is, because we're never going to sell it, that you're going to be able to be just fine. That's great. But think about everything else, right? Like, what if we can do that for the rest of the entire financial market? And what if we can do that for the rest of the way people are doing business? Why not believe, right? It's just as crazy. Well, it's probably not even as crazy as saying we can go to Mars, right? Why not fix what's here, right? So I love being optimistic about it. And I think I don't think anybody should be feel ashamed by being excited. Coming from the fundraising world, I always kind of contrast on the concept of full disclosure of warnings versus just true disclosure. Meaning, if you take a pitch deck and you say, hey, look, I don't have a business right now, but I want to build this business. and I want to do this thing. It's this white paper, it's whatever. And I'd like to raise money to do it. And people believe in that. Just throw your money into it and let it happen as long as it's full disclosure. On the other hand, you see where companies are either forced to or choose to say, you're going to lose your money. Nothing's actually happened. We'll put full financials out. We're not going to talk about anything until you see the full edited financials. Plus, there's no future assumptions here. Don't expect anything. We don't see a future. We're just going to keep doing business as is because they're afraid of risk. Well, then you don't have a vision and nobody knows what the heck you're going to do. Yeah, it might be safer, but it's probably a dinosaur too. So there's a trade-off to everything. And it's why are we disclosing information? It's not to have no excitement. It's to say, here's where we're at and here's where we think we're going. So we gotta mature in those ways, I think, of it.
Absolutely. Open that book up, paint that picture. I think that's so much about the ethos of the space that we're in right now. And I think that's such a truth to what's being built and what's being developed, and particularly what you guys are working on over there at Equa. But Shawn, I want to take the time. We got to close up now, sort of wrap the conversation. But before I do, I sort of always like to conclude out and sort of think out these conversations on projecting forward a little bit. We've done a little bit of that in a speculative way at the moment, but sort of looking ahead to pick your time frame, anywhere from the next year to the next 5 years. What are your big hopes for the industry? What are your big hopes for development, maturity, growth of ecosystems? Where are you seeing those big trends coming in? Be as specific or general as you like, but what else your sort of forward projections?
Yeah, what I want to see more than anything is for anywhere there's FUD, that we build a better solution that makes it obsolete and not an issue to talk about. For example, everybody's, okay, if we're afraid of energy, well, no, it's probably the opposite. Why don't we just figure out how to harness energy better and make this a catalyst for that? What do we want on regulation? Well, there's this FUD that says that everything's going to get banned and it'll never happen. Well, let's do the opposite of that. Let's figure out how we can govern better. Let's build better government and better structure so we don't have that issue. If you get to the why all this stuff exists, I think there's some really great outcomes. But I want to see Bitcoin become a reserve asset that is just indisputable, that everybody knows it's valuable and it works. I would love to see it used as payment form at a certain point in time, because I think it's very restrictive to just limit these things down based off of, there's so many smarter ways of how we could do taxes. Everybody knows that if you live in the US, it's a terrible system. It is a terrible system. I'd love to see that change. And I think crypto is going to change everything. I'd love to see accounting change. Like, why should you have to spend months on end auditing financials to pay taxes and have quadruple, triple ledgers of multiple people charging you to get to what transaction happened and what are we calling it? Like, we should just make that obsolete. The transaction happens, it's defined, it's done, and we don't have to go back and ask about it because it's on a permanent ledger of some sort. So I would love to see the fundraising mechanisms get to the point where true innovation can happen. It's not such a hard struggle for good companies to get bootstrapped. I think there's a great balance that can happen between restrictions such as treasury management and why you need to have VCs in a typical world, or I shouldn't say you need VCs, but why you need oversight and governance on spending, right? Why do you need to make sure somebody's managing the treasury? Well, because you don't want the money to disappear, and nobody wants to lose money. We want to be successful. I would love to see more ability for people to really run with what inspires them, especially small businesses, small companies. I'm very passionate about entrepreneurs, and anything I can do to give the tools from the big boys down and say, hey, we'll make it easier for you. We'll help you get there by giving you exactly what kind of roadmap you need to go down and help and double check that it happens. I'd love to see where that translates to the point where it's almost frictionless, not to the degree of an ICO, but as close to that as we can get with safety. I think there's massive value in being able to see a world where everything has continued to evolve to where there's a bigger, broader market that includes more people, the financial inclusion that's happening. And I hope probably a whole bunch more, but I just want to see the space continue to evolve in a way that's positive for humanity.
That's a powerful vision you laid out there. You didn't disappoint when I gave you the option to put a vision. You put a lot out there, and I fully respect that. So, Shawn, I want to thank you so much for speaking to us. It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you today. You've left me feeling optimistic and hopeful for the maturity and development of this space as a whole. And for all those watching, I want to say, you know, make sure you keep watching because there's so much going on, as I think this conversation proved. And we got all the best voices in the space here at Reimagine. So keep watching, plenty more to come.